It's 2 a.m. June 5th, 2002. A 14-year-old girl named Elizabeth Smart lies in her bed in Federal Heights, Utah, one of the safest neighborhoods in Salt Lake City. Her 9-year-old sister sleeps beside her. Down the hall, their parents dream peacefully, but the monster is already inside.
I have a knife at your neck.
The voice is calm, practiced, almost gentle.
Don't make a sound. Get up and come with me.
Elizabeth's first thought, this isn't real. This cannot be happening. But the metal pressing against her skin is real. The hand gripping her arm is real. And the shadow looming over her bed is terrifyingly, impossibly real. Mary Catherine. The little sister, she's awake too, watching. Frozen as a bearded man in dark clothes pulls Elizabeth from their shared bed. The knife never leaves her older sister's neck. Mary Catherine wants to scream. Every cell in her 9-year-old body is screaming, but the man's whispered threat paralyzes her.
Make a sound and I'll kill your entire family.
Elizabeth stands, moves to her closet, gets her red running shoes, the ones that match her red pajamas. Her hands shake. Scream? He'll kill Mary Catherine. Run. He's bigger, faster, armed. Fight? The knife is right there. She's been raised Mormon, raised to obey, raised to believe good girls who pray and practice harp and save themselves for marriage don't end up like this. But here she is. The man guides her downstairs, past her parents' bedroom, past her brother's rooms, through the kitchen where her mother had cracked open a window earlier, burned dinner, needed air. Someone cut through that screen. The June night air hits Elizabeth's face as they step outside. She's barefoot, except for the shoes in her hands, still in bright red pajamas, still hoping this is a nightmare. Behind them, Mary Catherine finally moves. She slips from bed and creeps to her parents' room. "Mom, someone's taking Elizabeth." Those 6 words will launch the biggest kidnapping case in American history. Let me tell you about the Smart family, because you need to understand what was lost that night. Ed and Lois Smart weren't just wealthy, they were good. The kind of good that actually means something. Ed worked as a real estate broker. Lois was a full-time mother to 6 children. They were pillars of their LDS church, active in their community, living what looked like the Mormon dream. Their home in Federal Heights was the kind of place where nightmares aren't supposed to intrude. Security system, safe neighborhood, good family. And Elizabeth, their second child, born November 3rd, 1987, she was the crown jewel. By 14, she embodied everything her culture celebrated. Devout, accomplished, innocent in a way that seems almost impossible in 2002. She practiced harp for hours every day, the ethereal music drifting through the house. She'd never been to a party, never kissed a boy, never even thought about alcohol. Her virginity wasn't just personal, it was spiritual capital, a sacred gift she intended to preserve for her wedding night. She was so perfect at 14, a family friend said. She wasn't interested in boys, she was interested in the harp and horses. That purity would become her prison. June 4th was a hard day. They just buried Ed's father brain tumor, 2 months from diagnosis to death. The funeral had been devastating. Everyone was exhausted. But that evening, there was an award ceremony at Elizabeth's school. She was playing harp. Despite everything, the Smarts went. Because that's what you do. You show up. Lois tried to make dinner beforehand, but burned it. Opened the kitchen window to air out the smoke. That window would change everything. They came home around 10 p.m. The girls went upstairs to read. They were working through Ella Enchanted, a story about a 14-year-old cursed to obey any command. The irony would haunt Elizabeth for years. They read, prayed. Elizabeth kissed her sister goodnight. The house settled into silence. 4 hours later, their daughter was gone. When Mary Catherine whispered those words, "Someone's taking Elizabeth," Lois Smart's first thought was nightmare. "Honey, go back to bed. You had a bad dream." But Mary Catherine was insistent, crying, "No, Mom, someone came in. He had a knife. He took Elizabeth." Ed ran from room to room, turning on lights, searching everywhere, calling Elizabeth's name. Nothing. Lois came downstairs, saw the kitchen window still cracked, the screen cut, slashed in a neat line. Someone had come into their home, walked past their bedroom while they slept, taken their daughter. Lois fell to the floor, screaming. Ed's brother would later describe that sound as the worst thing I've ever heard, like an animal dying, like the world ending. They called 911 at 4 a.m. What happened next was a masterclass in how not to handle a crime scene. The first officers were graveyard shift inexperienced, overwhelmed. They didn't seal the scene, didn't establish a perimeter, didn't start a chain of custody log. They let Ed and Lois call their entire extended family. Within 2 hours, 20 people were in that house, touching things, moving things, contaminating every surface. By the time Detective Don Bell arrived, it was too late. "I've been doing this 22 years, he'd later say. "I've never seen a crime scene so completely destroyed. No way we were getting forensics." They had one witness, 9-year-old Mary Catherine. Her description was detailed. A white man, 30 to 40 years old, about 5'8", dark clothes, baseball cap. A soft, calm voice that seemed familiar, though she couldn't place it. She thought, but wasn't certain, he'd mentioned ransom. The police thanked her, started running leads, but they made a critical error. They waited 3 hours before issuing an Amber Alert, 3 hours before releasing Elizabeth's photo, 3 hours before mobilizing the public. In kidnapping cases, the first 3 hours are everything. 65% of murdered children are killed in that window. The Smart family spent those hours at the police station, separated, being interrogated like suspects. Because when a child goes missing, parents are always suspects first. Ed sat in interrogation for 7 hours. Took a polygraph on day 5 after 5 days without sleep. It came back inconclusive. Of course it did. His daughter had just been stolen. He was barely holding together. But that inconclusive result leaked to the media, and suddenly the narrative shifted. Maybe this wasn't a stranger abduction. Maybe the Smarts knew something. Maybe Ed or one of his brothers had done something. Maybe this was a cover-up. The family was being destroyed from the inside. And Elizabeth? She was 3 miles away, chained to a tree, being assaulted by a man who claimed God told him to do it. Let me tell you about Brian David Mitchell. Born 1953 in Salt Lake City, second of 6 children in a Mormon family that looked good on paper and rotted from the inside. His father, Shirl, was a social worker, ironic, right? A man whose job was helping troubled families came home and destroyed his own son's mind. When Brian was 8 years old, Shirl sat him down with medical textbooks full of explicit images and gave him the talk. Not gentle, not age-appropriate. A graphic, clinical dissection that warped the boy's developing brain. Shirl also had a favorite punishment. He'd drive Brian to random locations and dump him on the roadside, make him find his way home alone. Brian learned early, the world is cruel, authority can't be trusted, and sex is power. By 16, he was exposing himself to 8-year-old girls. Juvenile detention, release. Learned nothing. At 19, married 17-year-old Karen Miner, had 2 kids, treated them like furniture. When Karen filed for divorce, Brian kidnapped the children and fled to a Hare Krishna commune in New Hampshire. Stayed 2 years before drifting back to Utah. His brother helped him back into the LDS church. Brian played reformed sinner beautifully, met Debbie, who had 3 kids, married her, tried to build a family. But Brian couldn't suppress his appetites. Debbie testified he assaulted her 3-year-old son, assaulted her daughters repeatedly, used religion like a weapon. Divorce number 2. But Brian learned something valuable. Faith is the perfect cover. If you convince people you speak for God, they'll forgive almost anything. So he went all in. In 1985, he met Wanda Barzee. She was 40, mother of 6, who would later describe her as monstrous, damaged, desperate for meaning. Brian offered her divine purpose, told her God had chosen them for a sacred mission, gave her a new name, Hephzibah, proclaimed himself Emmanuel, a prophet receiving direct revelation. The LDS Church excommunicated them both. Brian's response? Double down. He grew his beard wild, fashioned white robes, started wandering Salt Lake preaching his personal gospel. He wrote a 27-page manifesto, the Book of Emmanuel David Isaiah. In it, God's command: take 7 virgin wives, father children who would lead humanity into a new age. Wanda believed, or pretended to. On a spring day in 2002, Brian stood on a Salt Lake Street corner begging for change. A woman stopped, pressed $5 into his palm. "What's your name?" "Emmanuel." The woman was Lois Smart. She gave him her husband's number, said they might have work handyman stuff. They had a big house, always projects. Brian smiled his calm, unnerving smile. 7 months later, on November 10th, 2001, he stood on the Smart family roof installing a skylight alongside Ed, worked quietly, asked questions about the house, about the family, about the children. Ed remembers him as polite, unremarkable, the kind of guy who does decent work and doesn't cause problems. Brian was memorizing everything: the window, the bedroom, the route from bedroom to back door when the family went to bed. He worked 5 hours, made $75, shook Ed's hand, left, and started planning. The hike up Dry Creek Canyon takes 4 hours in daylight. In darkness, with a terrified child stumbling ahead and a knife at her back, it takes longer. Elizabeth's mind fractures during that climb. Every option leads to death. Scream? He kills Mary Catherine. Run? He's faster. Fight? The knife. So she walks, 1 foot in front of the other, up a mountain that overlooks her entire former life. Around 3 a.m., they pass a police car on the trail. Elizabeth's heart surges. "I'm saved," but Brian shoves her behind a bush, presses the knife harder. She hears him whisper like a prayer, "If this work is true, God, let this car pass." It passes. Elizabeth will think about that moment forever. How close. How a cop drove within 20 feet and saw nothing. How God, if he was listening, seemed to be helping her abductor. At dawn, they reach the campsite, crude but effective. Tarps between trees, a tent, stolen supplies. 3 miles from the Smart house. Might as well be another planet. A woman emerges from behind a tree. White robes, headdress, eyes that look through Elizabeth like she's not human. Wanda Barzee smiles, embraces her in what Elizabeth calls the most controlling hug I've ever felt, like being grabbed by a machine. Wanda leads her into the tent, washes her feet, a mockery of Mormon rituals. Then, "Take off your clothes, put this robe on." Elizabeth refuses. She's 14. She's never been naked in front of anyone but her mother. Wanda's voice goes dead. "If you don't, Brian will come in and take them off himself." Elizabeth undresses with shaking hands, sits on a bucket in the corner, starts to cry. Wanda leaves. Elizabeth sits alone, sobbing, praying, begging God for rescue. Instead, Brian comes back. He performs what he calls a marriage ceremony, a grotesque parody of sacred temple rites spoken over a 14-year-old ripped from her bed 6 hours earlier. He pronounces them married in the eyes of Jesus Christ. Then he rapes her. "I felt like my whole world had ended," Elizabeth would testify, "like my life had been completely destroyed." Because in Mormon culture, virginity isn't just personal, it's spiritual currency. Elizabeth had been taught her worth as a woman was tied to her purity, that she was like a rose beautiful until touched, then wilted and worthless. Now she was used, broken, worthless. No going back. Brian chains her to a tree. 15-foot steel cable around her ankle, padlocked. She can move 20 feet in any direction. That's her entire world now. If you try to run, Brian says calmly, I'll find you, kill you, then go kill your family, your parents, brothers. Mary Catherine, every single one, understand? Elizabeth understands. For 3 days, she doesn't eat, barely drinks, just sits chained, staring at sky, waiting to die. On day 3, she hears voices. Elizabeth! Elizabeth Smart! Faint, distant, unmistakable. A man, maybe her Uncle David, maybe someone else from search parties combing these mountains. She opens her mouth to scream. Brian is beside her instantly, knife out, pressed to her throat. Make a sound, he whispers, and I'll kill you and everyone down there. Walk down this mountain and slit their throats while they sleep. Elizabeth closes her mouth. The voices fade. The searchers move on. They were maybe half a mile away, close enough that if she'd screamed, they would have heard. But the knife was at her throat, and Brian had proven he could get to her family. So she stays silent, and the search parties move on, convinced she's not up here, convinced she's probably already dead. Back in Federal Heights, the Smart family is imploding. Ed collapses on day 3, hospitalized, sedated, barely functional. Lois cycles between catatonic grief and manic action, organizing searches while reporters camp on their lawn. The story has everything media loves: beautiful blonde victim, wealthy family, bedroom abduction in a safe neighborhood. Elizabeth's face is everywhere. Billboards, CNN, Fox News. 2,000 volunteers comb the mountains. The reward hits $250,000. And police focus on the wrong man, Richard Ricci, handyman with a criminal history who'd worked at the Smart House, been in prison for attempted murder of a cop, had a drug problem. When police discover he stole items from the Smart home, he becomes prime suspect. They interrogate him for hours, convinced he killed Elizabeth and buried her somewhere. It's never going to stop, a detective says. It's just going to go on and on. Put yourself in my shoes, Ricci pleads, tears streaming. I didn't do it. August 30th, 2002, Ricci suffers a brain hemorrhage in his cell, dies 3 days later. Police issue statements suggesting the case might die with him, that Ricci was almost certainly Elizabeth's abductor and probable killer. The Smart family knows they're wrong. They can feel it. Elizabeth is alive, out there, waiting. But police have moved on, case closed. Meanwhile, media shifts to another narrative, suspicion of the family. Anonymous sources leak that the window screen was cut from inside, that Ed failed his polygraph, that there are financial problems, family secrets, dark undercurrents. None of it's true, but damage is done. Nancy Grace tears into Ed on television. Where were you when your daughter was taken? As if sleeping in his own bed was evidence of guilt. Ed and Lois stop watching news. Focus on what they can control, the search. Tom Smart, Ed's brother, a news photographer, becomes the family's investigator, organizing searches, keeping Elizabeth's face in the news. Over 2,000 volunteers show up. They comb every trail, every canyon within 10 miles. They walk right past Dry Creek Canyon, right past where Elizabeth is chained. But Brian camouflaged the site well. From the trail, it's invisible. The searchers move on. Market cleared. Never come back. October 11th, 2002, 4 months into captivity. Mary Catherine sits in bed reading Guinness Book of World Records. She turns a page, sees a photo of an extremely muscular woman. Suddenly, inexplicably, memory crashes over her. That voice, that calm voice in the bedroom, I've heard it before. She sits up, heart pounding. Emmanuel, the homeless preacher, the one Mom gave $5, the one who worked on our roof. She runs to her dad's room, almost midnight, but she doesn't care. Dad, wake up, I know who it is. Ed jolts awake. What? Mary Catherine. The man who took Elizabeth. It was Emmanuel, the homeless guy who worked here. Ed's mind races backward. Emmanuel, the soft-spoken man in robes who'd worked on their skylight 7 months before the abduction. A guy they'd paid and forgotten. Are you sure? I'm sure. It's the voice. I recognized it that night. I just couldn't remember where from. Ed calls police immediately. They're skeptical. How can a 9-year-old remember a voice heard for 5 minutes, 7 months before, in trauma and darkness? But they work with Mary Catherine and a sketch artist. Over several sessions, she describes him. Clean-shaven, short hair, soft features, calm eyes. The composite looks nothing like Brian Mitchell circa October 2002, who now has a massive beard and wild hair. He looks like a biblical prophet. The sketch looks like an insurance salesman. Police file it away, continue other leads. Don't want to release it publicly, don't want to spook the suspect. The Smart family grows frustrated. They know this is the guy. Weeks pass. November. December. Elizabeth's 15th birthday comes, celebrated with a candlelight vigil drawing thousands. None of them know she's alive in California, living in a dry creek bed. Tom Smart has had enough. February 3rd, 2003, he appears on Larry King Live without police permission. There's a new suspect, a homeless man named Emmanuel who worked at the house. Police have a sketch but won't release it. Why not? Larry asks. You'd have to ask them. Next day, police have no choice. They release the composite. Tips flood in. One call changes everything. Brian Mitchell's sister sees the sketch, sees the description, knows instantly who it is. She calls the tip line, asks to remain anonymous, gives them a name, Brian David Mitchell. Suddenly, the investigation has a target. While Utah police scramble, Elizabeth is living hell in California. October 2002, Brian decides Utah's getting too cold. They're moving somewhere warmer. California. Greyhound bus from Salt Lake to San Diego. Brian disguises Elizabeth in a gray wig, oversized sunglasses, veil. When people ask, he says she had eye surgery. Most don't ask. Most don't want to get involved. They set up camp in a dry creek bed near Lakeside, a small town where homeless encampments are common. 3 people in robes don't attract much attention. California is somehow worse than Utah. Brian drinks heavily, panhandles for money, buys cheap alcohol, gets violently drunk, takes rage out on Elizabeth. He decides she needs to experience all sins before being a proper prophet's wife. Forces her to drink, watch pornography, participate in acts violating everything she was raised believing. He wanted to destroy who I was, Elizabeth would testify. Erase Elizabeth Smart and replace her with someone who belonged to him completely. Wanda grows jealous, demands more time with Brian, threatens to leave. Brian establishes a schedule, mornings with Wanda, afternoons and evenings with Elizabeth, like appointments. Elizabeth learns to dissociate, leave her body mentally during assaults, retreat somewhere inside where they can't reach. She sleeps as much as possible. Unconscious, she doesn't have to be present for her nightmare. One night, Brian passes out drunk. Elizabeth thinks about running. She's unchained. He's unconscious. But Wanda is watching. Elizabeth makes it 50 yards. Wanda catches her, drags her back. Try that again. You'll meet an angel with a flaming sword. Brian wakes, beats her, tells her if she ever tries escaping again, he'll make her watch while he kills her family one by one. Elizabeth believes him. November, they attend a party at an art collective. Fire dancers, performance artists. Weird, eclectic gathering where strange clothes don't stand out. Someone takes Elizabeth's photo. She's standing in robes and veil, looking completely lost. A partygoer pulls her aside. Hey, that guy you're with? He's an asshole. You should leave him. Elizabeth wants to scream, he kidnapped me. Please help. But Brian's watching, Wanda's watching. The knife is always nearby. She just smiles under her veil. Thank you for your concern. The guy walks away. Years later, he'll see her face on news and realize he talked to Elizabeth Smart. Did nothing. The guilt, he says, is something he'll carry forever. December. Brian shows Elizabeth a newspaper he found. Front page, her face. Her parents devastated. Story about the ongoing search. I thought they'd have given up by now, Brian says, genuinely puzzled. But they haven't. And seeing that photo proof her family's still fighting gives Elizabeth something she hasn't felt in months. Hope. February 2003. Brian makes a decision that will end everything. They're going back to Utah. He tells Elizabeth and Wanda that God revealed his mission requires returning to Salt Lake. Needs to be closer to the temple. Elizabeth's heart soars. Back to Utah, where people know her face, where she has a chance. She plays it cool, pretends to accept calmly. Inside, she's screaming with hope. They can't afford bus tickets, so they hitchhike. 3 people in white robes trying to thumb rides. Takes days. Brian disguises Elizabeth in the gray wig and sunglasses. If anyone asks, she had eye surgery. They cross into Utah March 8th. Brian starts taking them into public more, libraries, soup kitchens, LDS churches, always in robes, Elizabeth always veiled. March 11th, they go to a library. Elizabeth browses while Brian looks at maps. A librarian recognizes her, calls police. A detective arrives, approaches Brian while he's checking out books. "Sir, can I speak with you?" Brian smiles his calm smile. Of course, officer." "I'm looking for someone, a missing girl. Do you mind if your daughter removes her veil?" "Against our religious beliefs?" "Sir, this is important. We follow the old ways. Women cover themselves before God." The detective looks at Elizabeth. She stares back, heart hammering. "Say something. Just say something." But Wanda's hand is on her thigh, squeezing hard. Reminder. Threat. "Miss, are you okay? Do you need help?" Elizabeth's voice comes out whisper. "I'm fine." The detective looks at Brian, looks at Elizabeth, makes a judgment call. He lets them go. Elizabeth watches her chance at freedom walk away, thinks, that's it. I'll die with these people. But she's wrong, because one day later, everything changes. March 12, 2003, 1:30 p.m., Sandy, Utah. Anita Dickerson is driving with her husband, sees 3 figures in white robes walking along State Street. Something about the younger one catches her eye, the way she walks, holds herself. "Stop the car." Her husband pulls over. Anita gets out, approaches. "Excuse me, can I ask some questions?" Brian smiles. "Of course, sister. God bless." "What are your names?" "Peter Marshall. This is my wife, Juliet, and our daughter, Augustine." Anita looks at the girl, takes in the fake wig, unnecessary sunglasses, the veil that seems more disguised than religion. "Augustine, how old are you?" Small, hesitant voice. 18. She doesn't look 18, looks 15. Anita pulls out her phone, dials 911. "I think I'm looking at Elizabeth Smart." Brian's smile doesn't waver. "I'm sorry, sister, but you're mistaken. This is our daughter. Just stay here. Police are coming." Within minutes, squad cars converge. Officers approach cautiously. Brian maintains calm, explains they're religious travelers. This is his daughter. Officers separate them. Brian in one car, Wanda in another, Elizabeth in a third. In the back seat, Elizabeth sits in silence. Finally, the officer speaks. "Elizabeth, this is your last chance. Tell me who you are. This can be over." Elizabeth's mind races. What if I say yes and he doesn't believe me? What if they let me go back with Brian? What if this is a trap? "You are Elizabeth Smart, aren't you?" Elizabeth uses Brian's language, the biblical speech patterns, "Thou sayest." "You said it." "Yes." The officer's hands tighten on the wheel. He reaches for his radio. "Get Ed Smart to the station, now!" Ed Smart is at work when the call comes. A detective, voice tight. "Mr. Smart, come to Sandy Police Department immediately. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone, just come." "Did you find her?" "Just come, please." Ed drives like a man possessed, runs lights, doesn't care. His mind screaming, "She's alive! Please, God, let her be alive." He arrives at the station, sprints inside. An officer meets him. "Mr. Smart, we think we found her, but we need you to confirm." They lead him down a hallway, open a door, and there she is. A girl in a gray wig, oversized sunglasses, white robes, looking nothing like the 14-year-old taken 9 months ago. But it's her. Ed knows it's her. He approaches slowly. "Elizabeth, is it really you?" She looks up, removes her sunglasses. Ed sees his daughter's eyes for the first time in 278 days. "Yes, Dad." He pulls her into his arms, sobs, just holds her and sobs. Elizabeth cries too, not quiet, suppressed tears, real tears, loud, ugly, cathartic tears. "I knew you were alive," Ed keeps saying. "I never stopped believing." "I know. I could feel you looking for me." Within an hour, news breaks. Elizabeth Smart found alive. A miracle. A genuine, impossible, 1 in a million miracle. Because children who are kidnapped don't usually come home. Statistics say 65% are murdered within 3 hours. After 9 months, chances of survival are barely calculable. But Elizabeth Smart beat the odds. She survived, and now she was going home. The legal battle takes 8 years. Brian David Mitchell plays insanity from day one, sings hymns during interrogations, quotes scripture, refuses to answer questions. But in 2010, a federal jury sees through it. Elizabeth testifies against him. Now 22, reclaimed her life. She looks him in the eye. He's smart, articulate, and evil, manipulative, not spiritual, not religious, and not close to God. Guilty, kidnapping and sexual assault, life in prison without parole. He's currently in a maximum security facility in Arizona, where he'll die. Wanda Barzee served only 9 years before release in 2018. She now lives near a school in Salt Lake City, no parole restrictions preventing it. Elizabeth Smart graduated from Brigham Young University with a degree in music, married Matthew Gilmore, a man she met serving an LDS mission in Paris. They have 3 children. She founded the Elizabeth Smart Foundation to advocate for kidnapping victims and fight human trafficking. She speaks worldwide about trauma, recovery, and the dangerous mythology of sexual purity. "I was raised believing my worth was tied to my virginity," she said. "When that was taken, I felt worthless." We need to stop teaching children, especially girls, that they're damaged goods if someone violates them. She faced her abuser in court, reclaimed her story, built a life defined not by 9 months of horror, but by decades of purpose. "The best punishment I can give him," her mother told her, "is to be happy." So Elizabeth chose happiness. Against impossible odds, in defiance of every statistic, she survived. She healed. She transformed trauma into a crusade to help others. Today, when Elizabeth Smart tells her story, she doesn't speak as a victim. She speaks as someone who walked through hell and came out believing in miracles. Because on March 12, 2003, after 9 months of prayer, one finally came.